Okay, we're actually live. We're getting there. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Liz Live. I am Liz Statlander, marriage and family therapist and mental health counselor at our new time slot of 8 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We have a very special show tonight and a very special guest. And before I go ahead and introduce him, I want to talk to you guys just briefly about our show tonight and why I chose this topic and what's happening. So right now, we all know that the country is in mourning. We're sad, we're angry, we're frustrated, which is always what happens when we lose, members of our military, because we tend to take them for granted, but we know that they're out there fighting for our security and our safety. And when we see young, beautiful men and women coming home from overseas, knowing that they died fighting for us, it, I think, makes all of us go into a bit of a state of mourning. And what's been going on in Afghanistan has broken all of our hearts in so many different ways. And tonight we have a guest from the United States Army. And welcome to Sergeant Kyle Skidgel. Good evening, Kyle. And thank you so much for being here with us tonight on Liz Live.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
So, you and I have had some opportunity to talk today, but to set up just a little bit more for the audience, I am a mental health counselor, and I care very much about the mental health of all people in the world. But obviously, I have a special love and concern for the American people, and a very special concern also for the US military. And I've had the honor and pleasure of having many clients who have been members of the military, and they have very specific mental health issues. And I know that when we see some of the things that we've seen in the past week or so, and we know that there are families grieving out there for their Gold Star children, that it makes us all sad. And we know that people in the military really deal with very specific mental health issues. So that's what we're talking about tonight. And I know that I got bombarded with a lot of my viewers, wanting to get political and wanting to ask these questions. And, I really don't want the show to go there, as, Kyle and I have already really agreed and discussed that, we're not going to get into commenting so much on why or how anything happened, just that something happened and there were lives lost. And, Kyle has been in Afghanistan before. He did one tour in Afghanistan and he did another tour in Iraq. And so, Kyle, welcome. And what can you tell us, just to start at the very beginning? What can you tell us, if anything, about what it's like to be, a sergeant in the U.S. Army?
Okay, yeah. Um, Being a sergeant in the U.S. Army is for me, it's pretty fun. I mean, you get the responsibility of taking care of some of these younger soldiers and training America's future soldiers, really. So I have a lot of responsibility as far as teaching these younger soldiers how to eventually one day, as we like to say, fill my shoes or take my place as I progress, and then eventually somebody will need to take my position. So helping these soldiers to get to that point where they can one day take over the responsibilities that I have.
Now, I know some of this conversation for me and you may be a little redundant, but my audience hasn't heard this yet. So I'm going to kind of
Sure, sure,
re-ask you some of the questions that we talked about earlier.
of course.
So can you talk a little bit to us about, how did you decide that you wanted to be in the United States Army?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a little boy, we had a family friend who, early on when after 9/11, when the war first started, he joined the army, and I was always like his little buddy. He was kind of somebody that I looked up to as kind of like an older brother that I didn't really have. I grew up with a sister, younger sister, so he was kind of like the older brother that I never had, and I just always thought it was so cool seeing like his uniforms and some of the gear that he may have had when I visited his house and things like that. So just kind of got the idea of being a soldier at a young age, and then just always continued to love and appreciate our country, and finally decided when my time was right at about 20 years old to go ahead and join the army.
Now, at 20 years old, and you're what, 27 now?
Yes.
Okay, so at 20 years old, 20 years old is young, and there's a big developmental difference between, a 20-year-old and a 27-year-old. So at 20, do you think that you really understood when you signed up, what kind of responsibilities that you were really signing up for?
So I like to think that I did. Maybe I had an understanding of what I thought I may be signing up for as far as joining the army at a younger age. I mean, I also
Mhm.
did a lot of research early on when I was about to join the military, so I had a pretty good understanding of what it was that I was getting myself into. But of course, with like most things, until you actually do it, you
Yeah.
don't really know exactly what it is that you're getting yourself into. But it was something that I had done enough research on that pretty much no matter what happened, I was prepared for it because I had done my research.
And where do you think that your love of America came from?
Um, that's a good question. Hmm. I think just the idea that that we're free, we have the freedom of speech, we're free to travel about our country, the world as we want. Um, I think I really just love the idea of freedom, and that's what really gets me.
Yeah, me too. I think it's the
Uh,
most special virtue about our country, and just also our interpersonal freedoms to think for ourselves. And
yes,
it's really something that's so special, and it comes with a lot of responsibilities. I think it does. And I can't imagine, you must have been a very mature, 20-year-old to be able to understand that. Cause part of the reason I wanted to do the show is because I feel I'm getting a sense from the general public that, Americans, especially maybe the younger generation, have forgotten what it means to be free and forgotten how important freedom is. And it's so important that people like you are willing to die for it. And they don't realize what kind of sacrifice being in the military really requires. Um,
sure, sure.
and I know I remember asking you before, were you aware at 20 years old that, wow, I could actually have to die for my country?
Yes, so I was definitely aware of that. I mean, really growing up in the era that I did with 9/11 happening when I was so young, and then just seeing how everything played out throughout the years up until I then decided to join the army. So I definitely had a good understanding of that could possibly happen to me, and that was probably really the only thing that made me nervous about joining the military was just the idea that I could end up in a situation where I could potentially die. But
Yeah.
I think just having families that I love and I support, and then just even thinking about the American population, just I would like to continue to try to be a part of the reason that we get to continue to have our freedoms.
Do you find that a lot of people your age or younger people have sort of become disconnected from the importance of freedom and the ideals that freedom, the implications that freedom, brings to this country?
I do a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of, I think it's maybe by nobody's fault in a way, but we've become, I think, in some ways such a spoiled culture. We have everything that we want and everything that we need and more. And it's like the politics of affluence. We have so much that we take it for granted and we forget, somebody had to die for us to have all of these things.
I agree.
I mean, it's so sad, but as we all know throughout history, somebody had to die and someone had to sacrifice. Many hundreds of thousands of people had to sacrifice for the
Yes.
freedoms that we enjoy today. Um, if you can answer this, how have you and your colleagues been feeling? This may seem maybe a bit rhetorical, but how are you guys feeling just after knowing that 13 of your brothers and sisters were killed over in Afghanistan?
Yeah, sure. I know for myself and a lot of my close friends, and colleagues, people that I work with on a daily basis, I know that we are all extremely sad. We feel a lot of sadness and whatnot for those people's families, and you know we hate to see that happen to anybody. So there's a lot of sadness, and
That
we just pray for those families.
Yeah, we do. I know we're all doing that. The country's doing it. Okay, so let's get to just talk about Afghanistan, not, again, not in a judgmental way, but I want to hear about your experiences. So how long were you over in Afghanistan?
I was in Afghanistan for about 6 months.
Me, who's never been to Afghanistan, except for what I read, in preparation for the show. Can you give us an idea of what it's like over there?
So I'll say in my opinion, what it's like in Afghanistan, which is one of the biggest things I tell everybody, is it's hot. It's really hot,
Yeah.
especially during the summer months. You get the temperatures from anywhere from like 100 to 120, 130 at times. Um, but then in the wintertime, it gets cold in comparison to 130 degrees. And there
Okay.
were a couple of times that I was there that we saw a little bit of snow.
Oh,
Nothing
really?
crazy, but I did see some snowflakes a couple of times in Afghanistan.
Wow.
Um,
Wow. So one of my friends asked me to ask you this question, and it's a good one. When it's 130 degrees and it's hot, I mean, I can't even imagine really what that feels like. But when it's 130 degrees, how do you walk around with all that gear and weapons and helmets and all of, I mean, do you train for that?
um, I don't think that there's any way that you can really train for that. It's an experience. You can't really prepare yourself for that either. But I will say on a day to day, so whenever we're deployed, we're usually inside of a secure base that has a
Okay.
security around it at all times. So there's never, oh, I guess there are worries, but there's not always a threat where we're always wearing all of the gear, the helmets, everything 24/7. It's not like that. At least in my experience in the times that I was there, obviously earlier on in the wars, possibly maybe in the future, but not while I was there. So my day-to-day uniform was just the normal army uniform, and then I did have my weapon because obviously we are in a combat area. Um, so yeah, it was hot, but I wasn't wearing all of that gear. And also, we have most everything we did, we tried to keep it to the indoors. Obviously, we had vehicles that we have to upkeep, and there were things that we had to do outside. But then we have great like work rest cycles for different heats. So we have different category of heat, and so that's just kind of how we kept up with the heat and staying hydrated over there.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, I know you guys are in like tip top shape and you do all kinds of, really difficult training, but I just can't imagine. I mean, I'm down in South Florida and it's like 92 and I can barely, exercise outside during the day because it's just brutal. And I was trying to imagine 130 degrees. That's really tough. So when you're over there and you're serving your country and it's hot and you're, far away from your family and far away from home, how do you guys and gals keep morale up? How do you do it?
All right. Yeah. So we have a lot of resources available to us. Like we have books, we have TVs, we have video games. When I was in Afghanistan, we had volleyball, we had basketball. In Iraq, we had kickball, we had soccer, we had wiffle ball. So we have all types of different things where we can, keep our minds off of work for a little bit and just kind of relax and unwind.
Okay. So you do have some, so it's not like you're, I think most of us imagine like you're out in a tent in the middle of the desert with nothing, but Americans do a good job at setting up pretty decent bases, I'm sure, and
Oh
try to make
yes,
it as
yes,
as like home as possible as it could be over in the Middle East. It's such a
yeah.
different culture. And if you can speak a little bit about it, what exactly were you doing over there? What was your mission when you were there?
We w- what I did, we mostly just did like support type things. We would help bring resources out to the other bases. So we would just load up our trucks with anything from food and water to vehicle parts if they had broken down vehicles or um, beds or just any type of equipment, food, water, whatever. We would load our trucks up and then we would drive it out to wherever they needed those resources at.
Okay. And did you do any other like did you get to interact with the Afghani people at all while you were
I did
there?
I did get to interact with them a little bit, not a lot. Um, but it was really fun when we did get to interact with the civilian population.
Were the Afghani people welcoming and happy to see us there?
I think it was hard to tell at times because I think when the army comes rolling in, we have tens to hundreds of people at a time, and they just kind of a little bit overwhelming just seeing all these people kind of rolling in like, oh, what's the army up to today? But there were people, once things calmed down or they got used to you, they would become friendly. They would offer you tea, snacks, water. Then they would try to talk to you. Um, try to check out the things that you have, like your gear, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it must look, so different to them, what their culture that they're used to seeing. And, I did a lot of reading today to try to really understand, why we were there and what was going on in those 20 years, aside from the fact that, we believe that, well, Afghanistan was hiding Osama bin Laden for a while, so we had to go over there and, figure out what's going on. And we were there for so many years. And it seems like things, would get kind of heightened for a while and then they would calm down and get heightened for a while and calm down. So it was never just one way. It seems like 20 years of ups and downs and, different twists and turns. Are you able to speak to that at all? Agree with that?
I can agree to it. I feel the same way. Yes.
Yeah. It just seems like, when I started reading about it, like right now, everyone's got an opinion and saying all these different things, but when you really sit down and you read and try to understand what we were doing there and why we were there for so long and all the different twists and turns, it everything made a lot more sense to me. And I think, again, that's another sort of piece of the puzzle, is that the general public is very disconnected from those, facts and figures that, you have to really sit down and read about so you can get some understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, I agree to that.
I think people are somewhat disconnected. So, taking it from, just an idea of what it was like being over there, into, mental health and, all the different things that you guys face. What I found interesting is when I was reading, I also discovered that, Afghanistan is a very impoverished country. And when I started reading, I found some interesting statistics that, only 80% of people actually have a bank account. And this is, these statistics, these
Oh,
things I
wow.
read were, yeah, like really current. And that like only 7% of the people who have a bank account are women, and the other, percentage are men. And, but from the beginning of the time when we arrived in Afghanistan in 2001 to today, so many things have changed in a positive way in Afghanistan. I mean, the numbers were staggering. I mean, I have them in my notes somewhere, but the amount of women that are, in college and getting educated from the 2001 to 2021 was, I have it in my notes somewhere, but it was like, it went from like a couple thousand to like millions, of people, or hundreds of thousands of women. And so, and technology advanced, and there were so many things that, the Afghani people, I guess were really benefited from us being there for as long as we were, that we don't, again, if you don't sit and really get into the research, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Um, do you find that like a lot of people, when they come to you to talk about different things, are just so far off when they're talking about different military deployments and reasoning for why we're there?
Yeah, I think just like you said, like unless you really sit down and take your time to do the research, you're never really going to understand. Especially most people, they just kind of see what they see on the news, and then that's what they think they know. But I mean, what the news only gives you what, in my opinion, like
What they want to
kind
tell
of
you.
yeah, like the headline. But I mean, no matter what, you're always going to have to do your research. Even if somebody tells you something, you still have to go and do your research to kind of learn more about that, get the details, the statistics, everything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really quite interesting when I started really getting into reading, and just the way that things would spike and then they got calm again. And, you know, it just very, very, very interesting. So, okay. So anytime I think that our country sees, uh, military servicemen and women, come home in I hate to be so brash, but to come home in a coffin, to come home, and wrapped in the American flag. I think it really does touch each and every one of us, unless you just don't have a heart. I mean, I think that,
For
I
real,
think,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that again, when I really do believe that the country is grieving right now. And I can only imagine if the average American is grieving for the families, with the military. I can only imagine, the stress that the people who are actually in the military are going through, during these circumstances, and many others. Have you ever lost a close friend or a colleague while have been serving?
So thankfully, I've never lost anyone that I've served, directly, um, with or under, never deployed together, never really worked together on a day to day. But I do know some people that were somewhat close that have not died over in a combat area, but actually have taken their own lives here stateside,
Wow.
just due to the overwhelming stresses and whatever they may have been dealing with. And it just became too much without, reaching out.
Right. And I think that that's where we want to go, like for the rest of the show. So one of the statistics that really surprised me that I read this week is that during, from August, uh, I believe 15th to today, there have been over 35,000 calls by veterans to the Veterans Affair Suicide Hotline.
Oh, wow.
So I was so curious as to why that is. So when I tried to read further into it, I really couldn't get an answer. So I can only guess as a mental health professional why that is. And I would imagine that it's just very, very triggering that when you are in the military and you see your, fellow service people, dying in overseas. It doesn't matter where they die, but coming home from overseas, away from their families, didn't get to say goodbye. I think that it probably touches everybody, but again, I think it touches people who are actually serving in a different way. Would you agree with that?
I would say that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
Because that's something that, you know, like you said in the beginning, could actually happen to you. You know, I'm not in the military. So the chances of me dying in combat are zero, right? I mean, it could
Right.
happen. So so when I see it on television, I just feel like, oh my gosh, I just think about the parents and the brothers and sisters, and I do so much grief work in my practice. So I think of what they're all going through, and what each life meant. Because when somebody dies, it's not just one loss of life, it's all the lives that that person touched. It's anyone who cared about them. And so I get lost in thinking about what they must be going through. But I don't personally think, oh my gosh, that could be me. But for you, I mean, it's got to touch you in that way, right? I mean, you've got to be imagining like that could have been me.
Yes, yes. When I first heard about the events, I definitely had that moment of like that could have been me.
It
I
could
mean,
have been. You were
when I was in
there.
Afghanistan, I was very close to that area. So it just the idea that I was somewhere even close to where the events took place is just it's crazy.
It is. Um, you know, I remember one time when I happened to be Jewish. I remember, and my family's all from Germany. And I remember going through the Anne Frank house like 15 years ago when I was in Amsterdam. And when I went through the house, like I looked at her face, at her picture, and I thought, wow, that could have been me if I was born just a little bit earlier, and that could have been me, hiding in an attic for 3 years, and all my family members taken. So I think that when there's like that personal, identification of, oh my God, that really could have been me, and it really could have been you. I mean, you were just there not so many years ago, and by the grace of God, you were safe, and the people that you love were safe. But when you see that on the screen, I think it's really got to be quite moving for all people who are in the military.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you see? You said you've seen a lot of people in the military taking their own lives and dying by suicide, and the numbers are staggering. I saw one article in the Military Times that said 4 times as many troops and vets have died by suicide as in combat. And that was the cost of war study. And that was just done in June of 2021 of this year.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah. And the numbers and it's not just combat, people who are in combat, but people who are in the military service in general.
Mhm.
And what do you see as far as, colleagues with mental health issues, suicide ideation, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, sure. I definitely see the army is it can be a tough job. I mean, you constantly have to train for something. You know, it's a very involved job. It's a tough job at times. It's a very rewarding job as well, but it can be very stressful at times. And I think the biggest thing is that people just either don't understand the resources that they have available to them to talk to somebody, or they're maybe just too proud, maybe too embarrassed, maybe afraid of reaching out to find the help that they need. And then unfortunately, it leads to potential suicide or harming themselves or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And I think too that there's, from my experience working with veterans, quite a few over the years, and police officers, I see a commonality in that, those professions are the protectors of the country. They're protectors of the streets. They're the strongest. They're the finest, the most, well-trained people that are supposed to be tough and strong and protect and be stoic all the time. So when you take that culture and somebody who's supposed to be big, tough, and strong is feeling depressed or scared or anxious, I'm sure, they must think, well, what is that? How does that look if I'm supposed to be this big, strong, soldier, and then I'm asking for, you know, mental counseling, mental help.
Yes, I can speak from experience a little bit on that one. I know that I was dealing with some maybe mental health issues myself, and I just was like, I don't need to talk to somebody. And I always had kind of the bad idea of even reaching out to somebody. And, those ideas at the time, they have definitely changed since. But at the time was like somebody just gets paid to give their opinion. And how is somebody going to know me who doesn't know me? And how can they have an opinion on how I'm feeling by just talking to me? Things like that. But eventually it got to the point where I really did need somebody to talk to. It started to affect my relationship with my wife. It started to affect my work performance. And so, I had to finally swallow my pride and go reach out and get the help that I needed.
Wow. And was it totally different than you thought?
Um, so it did start out, I will say, it started out a little bit rocky just
Okay.
because I got, unfortunately, the first therapist that I ended up talking with actually ended up getting fired shortly thereafter,
Oh, wow.
just because I went to the therapy with my wife, and she came with me to try to see if we could she could come, and then we could kind of work together. So kind of like a marriage counseling, but also to help me get back on track. So
Mhm.
it ended up being more from the therapist of like kind of like an attack session where it was just really everything that I did was wrong and everything was my fault kind of thing. Which for the most part it was, but it was just like, that's not why I came here. Like
Right.
I came here I told you that. Now I need you to help me figure out the ways to fix these things.
Well,
But
yeah. Okay. I want to just note something there, because
sure.
that tells me right there that that therapist had no training or education in couples therapy, because, people don't realize that, marriage and family therapists like myself, well, I happen to have 2 degrees, but it's specific training for marriage and family and individual. And a lot of people who don't have actual training in relationship therapy try to do it. And a lot of times it doesn't work out so well.
Okay.
So I have
Okay.
a funny feeling that possibly that person didn't really have the right training.
Okay.
Just a suspicion, you know?
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
know.
I
I
mean,
mean, who
hey, who
knows?
knows? Who
Who
knows?
knows? So then what happens?
So after that, I got even more serious about like, yeah, I'm definitely the therapy thing. It's like this, it's for the birds. It's not for me. Like, it's obviously not going to help. Like, I'm just going to continue to do me, and I'll figure it out. The kind of the tough guy attitude. Um, but then my wife actually ended up getting in contact with our chaplain. So in the army, we have chaplains. They're the people they do like the church services, therapy, things like that. So she reached out to him and asked him if he could talk to me. And after a while, I finally decided to meet and sit down with him. And he just had such a unique way about talking to me that he didn't even ask me anything about how I was feeling. He just asked me how I felt about like God or religion, and I shared my thoughts and opinions on that, and then we really just talked about that, which got me to open up on my own and then talk to him about the things that I was feeling. And then eventually we got to the point after a couple of meetings where we brought my wife in, and then we sat down as a group and we were all able to get on the same page and eventually uh, kind of get myself back on track. So that way I was, uh, continuing to build a healthier relationship with my wife.
So he really established trust with you first,
Yes. Yes.
which is
Yes.
really important that we do that in therapy and we don't go on the attack. So it sounds like the chaplain was pretty bright and knew what he was doing. And I'm so happy for you, and that you found somebody, because a good therapist can make a big difference, you know.
Definitely, I definitely can.
What would you say to some of your, your fellow servicemen who might be watching this and thinking like, wow, I would really like to go for help, but I'm afraid of the same, I'm afraid of being judged, or I'm afraid of being attacked.
I would definitely say, swallow that pride, reach out, go get the help that you need. If you're afraid of people thinking, like, oh, well, that guy's weak because he had to see a therapy or go to therapy or see a therapist, like it definitely takes a stronger person, not even man, but like a stronger person, man, woman, whatever, to realize that they need help more than what they can do for themselves. So I would definitely say to do it for sure.
Yeah. And I think that it takes a very strong person to reach out and become transparent to a stranger and say, I need help. I mean, it's
Hmm.
humbling and it's scary. And I think that the stigma and the idea of what might happen in therapy is what, really scares people. And what I tell people a lot too is if you go to a therapist and you don't like them, you don't have to go back. You can go and try out a couple therapists until you find that person that you say, hey, I feel really comfortable with this person. I feel like I can open up and I'm not being judged, right? I mean, you don't have to stick with somebody you don't like.
Absolutely. I agree
And I think that's,
100%.
yeah, and that's a big issue. Because a lot of times I'll get people in my office who just say like, I've been to like therapy a couple times and I didn't like it. And I'll say, well, what didn't you like about it? Or what did they do so that make sure I don't do it? I asked that on the first session because it's interesting to see, what experiences people have had with us, and they're not always good, you know.
Yeah.
Not every
Even,
therapist is talented.
yeah. I mean, even later on, eventually I moved on from the location that I was at with that chaplain. So I no longer had him. I mean, I still had his phone number. I was able to reach out to him, but at that point I was like, well, I would still like to, go to therapy. There are still things that I maybe don't know how to work through. So I tried again and I got another therapist. He wasn't terrible, I guess, but all he wanted to do was just talk about like combat experience. And I'm like, that's not why I'm here. Like it wasn't even anything army or work related on why I was seeing him. It was really personal life issues, which is why I wanted to talk to him. But all he wanted to talk about was just that type of thing. So
Mm.
eventually I had to then try to go and see another one. And now I finally have met somebody that really listens and established that trust and, just really cares about what I have to say.
Wow. Well, that's really amazing to hear. So let's talk about some of the issues that are unique to people in the military. But let's not forget that people in the military are people. They may have their own set of issues, but they're still people, and they do have children and spouses and parents, just like all the rest of us. And so, in that way, we're all the same, right? We all have issues with our relationships. I mean, that's just the way it goes. But some of the things that are unique to military personnel are what we call polytrauma, which means many traumas, right? So they don't just have one trauma, they might have multiple, from a single deployment, from multiple deployments. Is there anything that would you could add to that?
I'm not really sure. Just say whatever it is that you might be dealing with. It just, don't take the easy way out. There's always somebody. There's always a resource. There's a friend, a family. There's always somebody that you can reach out to, and
Yeah.
you know it's going to be the harder option. It's a hard thing to do, but you know it's the best thing to do.
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, aside from all the trauma, there's also, being away from your family, being away from your children, being away from your parents, and then you're so far away and you're in almost like this other world that many of my, military clients have shared that they have a very difficult time re-entering civilian life. And then that's
Yes.
where the problems come in. Do you see a
Yeah.
lot of that with your friends and yourself?
Yeah. So it was definitely that's definitely a real thing. It's really important to have a strong support system, family, spouse, kids, especially if you have young kids, they don't really understand what's going on. So it's good to have that strong support system. And then, parents, grandparents, whoever back home just supporting. And thankfully, in today's age, we have Zoom, we have
Yeah.
FaceTime, we have, Messenger video, whatever it may be. So, you're not there face to face or whatever, but you still have that contact for the most part. You know, internet services are definitely not what they are here over there, but it gets the job done.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, the transition from over there to coming back home can be stressful for some. Like, just while you're over there, I always like to say, I know what I'm going to wear every day. I know where I'm going to eat every day. I eat at the same time every day. I wake up at the same time every day. I put the same thing on every day. I do the same job every day. And then I get off work. I go to the gym at the same time every day, take a shower, go to bed, and just repeat for months on end. And then, you come home and now you have all of these other responsibilities. You have to mow your lawn, you have to take the dogs for a walk, your children have appointments, your wife has appointments, your wife has to work, you still have to work, you have to take care of yourself, all of these things, they start to just come back, and at times can kind of be a little bit overwhelming. And I think that's where a lot of people have issues, is just kind of coming back, and just everything just hits you at once, because it's not like, I mean, you can kind of take your time to get back into things. And if you have an understanding partner or family, they kind of help you get back into it, but it's still a hard transition.
Yeah. I can only imagine. And I think the other piece of that re-entering is the emotional piece where, you didn't have to really fulfill anyone's emotional needs when you're, overseas. It's, you're with a bunch of your colleagues and everyone's sort of on the same page, and you know what you have to do, and that's it. And then when you're back in home life and you're re-entering the home, the wife or the husband, wants affection and wants attention, and the kids are pulling on you, or the dogs or whatever. And it's like, whoa, I didn't have to fulfill anyone's emotional needs for the last year. And like, it's just that on top of responsibilities. And I mean, I would imagine even just being in Afghanistan or Iraq, which I really can't imagine, compared to the United States, like there must be so much more stimulation just, walking down the street in the United States compared to, Afghanistan or Iraq.
Oh, sure. I mean, definitely. I mean, because you see things and you hear things that, the average person may not hear or see on a daily basis. Like, I mean, random gunshots or the occasional random explosion or something. But um, yeah, that's definitely a real thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just such a difference. And that's usually where I get, active duty people. And right after a deployment is usually they come home, and there's a lot of marital problems that go on then around that time, and a lot of depression will set in. And then for veterans, when I'm working with veterans, it's that, but it's also a lot of PTSD, a lot of post traumatic stress. You know, even from, like you said, just hearing, explosions like right next to your base, wherever you're sleeping, and you're woken up in the middle of the night, and that doesn't happen in the suburbs of America, and not, God, thank you, God. I mean, not yet.
Yes, for real.
Not yet. It's not happening, but at least not for most of us. But so yeah, I mean, it's the issues are so they're so unique, and yet at the same time, they're not. I mean, there's the family issues and the marital issues, I think, are kind of common, but the amount of trauma and the reintegration is very challenging, I think.
Yeah.
Another thing I read about mental health issues is that because of the medicine that we have today, and because of the medical care and the rehab and everything that we have for soldiers today, they can come home and then be redeployed. So they're doing a lot more deployments in this day and age than in the past. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was something that I read in an article that I thought, well, that's really interesting. So the amount of trauma is, much more intense today than maybe in the past because of the multiple deployments. Does that sound like something that could be accurate from your
Um,
experience?
it's I'll say not quite.
Okay.
Maybe not every detail, I would say. I know that, after you come back from each deployment, we have what we call dwell time. So that's a certain amount of time that you have to be stateside, before you are actually eligible to go back over on another combat rotation. Just because, you know, earlier on in the war, that those men and women, they would come home and then they could just be redeployed right back, within any given time, just go right back. And obviously that causes a lot of mental and emotional, even physical strain on
Oh, yeah.
anyone really. So as time has gone on, seniors have become more aware of that, so they created dwell time, which is now, I'm pretty sure it's 12 months. You have to be, stateside at your unit, your station, wherever, before you're eligible to redeploy.
Okay. Is there a cap on how many deployments one person can have total?
I don't think that there is.
Okay. So if you want to do 10 deployments, you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as you mentally and physically, um, can handle it, and you can maintain a deployable status, and um, you continue your service, you can just you can continue to go. Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course there's so many other jobs that you can do in the military as well if you don't, want to continue combat. Another thing that I read about was because of the use of IEDs, which for people who don't know, those are well, why don't you would be a better person. What can you explain to us what an IED is?
Yeah, so IED, stands for improvised explosive device. So I mean, they can really be made out of anything. A lot of times, earlier on when they first, uh, started using them, I mean, pressure cookers, cell phones, anything that, can really be made into a type of explosive. And then, they just kind of hide them and hope that, the Americans or whoever is the target, you know, drives over them, walks over them, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, so from reading about it, that has increased the amount of traumatic brain injury,
Yeah.
because if you are exposed to a lot of them, it can, like, I've had clients that lost hearing in one ear because of it, that had breathing problems because they might have inhaled something from being too close to it. I mean, a multitude of different physical and mental injuries that can happen if you happen to even just be near it. let alone, be caught up in it, So, uh, I thought that was interesting too. So, modern day warfare brings with it also a different set of issues, mental issues, physical issues. It's all difficult no matter how you, shake it out, but I think it does change perhaps over time. Yeah.
Yes, and
So,
also, our equipment and our vehicles and everything that we use have obviously advanced as well to be able to
right.
eliminate those issues.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing what you guys can do. So, summing everything up as we kind of wrap up, I would say that, well, I would ask the question, and this was a viewer question before the show. Considering all this that we're talking about, all of the issues that can come about emotionally, mentally, the possibility of, of being killed, what would encourage, or what would you say to continue to encourage people to join or volunteer for the military? What's it about?
I mean, you know, I did a little bit of time as a recruiter for the army as well. So I got that question a lot. Even as far as like people coming like, well, I don't want to die. I don't want to go to war. I don't want to do things like that. The army has so many other jobs that require zero, combat. Like you may or may not be deployed at times, but you're not going to be going out and doing combat related things. You have your cooks, your like supply specialists, and then you have people who do like your computer work, admin data, things like that. So you know if you're not so much interested in the hard charging, combat fighting, things like that, the army has so many other jobs and skills, trades that you can learn. um, and then the college, the benefits that you can receive for yourself, your family. Those are the types of things that I would say to somebody to encourage them to join the military.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that the military will often pay for a lot of education. I mean, it can be really wonderful and open a lot of doors for you for sure. But what about for the young kids watching who, were like you at 18 or 16, and, are looking up to you, or looking up to, a neighbor, or their cousin's boyfriend or something. And they say, no, I want to go, and I want to fight for this country. But, there's all these, what if this happens? What if that happens? What would you say to them?
I would say I would just be honest. You have to keep those things in mind. There is a possibility. You could one day you could be shot. You could be shot at. You could be involved in an explosion. Even something as simple as a training accident, a
Right.
vehicle accident. There are risks with whatever job you do, or if you want to do, like airborne operation, you want to jump out of airplanes. Now you're jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. And anything could go wrong at any time, but if that's something that you're willing to do, I mean, definitely go and do it. It's a great experience.
What does it mean to you to be serving the United States of America?
What does it mean to me? Oh man. um really just it just feels good to be able to serve and help be a part of the organization that keeps giving us our freedoms, and just knowing that I'm a part of an organization that helps to protect, my family, your family, the viewers' family, everyone's families, and just there's no greater feeling, I think.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine that. So, I think on that note, I salute you, sergeants, and all of the wonderful, beautiful young people who are doing the same thing that you're doing. And you're currently in Fort Bragg, right? At the base.
Yes.
Yeah. And are you going to be there for a while, or are you going to be moving on, or do you not know?
So I will be here for a little bit longer, but I hope to soon move on to my next adventure.
And do you have any idea what that's going to be?
So I'm hopeful for actually becoming a drill sergeant and training like people coming into the army, their first experience in the army, and just teaching and helping to mold those future soldiers.
Wow, you're one intense man, huh? I know some people who could use you. I might give them your phone number. But
Sure, sure.
yeah, but in all seriousness, we thank you so much. And I thank you for your participation tonight. And are there any you know, I know you mentioned you were looking into some resources. Is there any other information that you want to share with our viewers before we wrap it up for the night?
Yeah, definitely. That would be great. So I did a little bit of research, and since we talked about like PTSD, depression, anxiety, things like that, I did something as simple. I just went to Google and I typed in like veteran suicide hotline, and there were so many things that popped up just on that. One that stuck out to me was the very first one was veteranscrisisline.net, and you go on there, and then it literally just spells it out for you what you need to do if you need to talk to somebody. They have a phone number with the extension line. You dial the phone number, hit the extension. Now you're connected with somebody. They even now have an online chat option that you can use to just talk over text if it's voice isn't something that you wanted to do. And now they even have actual text on your cell phone. You text your message or whatever to a certain number, and then you can respond, or somebody will respond to you via text message. And then they also had an option for reaching out to somebody who could help support you in your local area.
Okay. I have to get myself on that list. I have to figure out how to do that,
Yeah, absolutely.
because I would love to continue work with the military community. I mean, I just do it by chance, whoever comes, it just happens to come to me, but I would love to get more involved. So maybe that's something you and I can talk about after the show. So, all right. So Kyle, for you, I'm going to, before we sign off, I'm going to play our outro music, and you hang around because I want to keep talking to you for a few minutes before we say goodbye. And for any of you who may have written questions or comments, I promise that I will get to them. But when I'm in this format and I'm going through Zoom Live on Facebook, I can't see Facebook and I don't have anyone helping me, my producer with me. So but I will get back to you. And if it's a question for Kyle, I'll pass them along to him and we'll try and get back to you in a timely manner. But as far as that goes, I would like to say good night and God bless everybody. And God bless everybody in the military. And we will see you. We'll see you next time. See you next time.